My father's hand came down on my face so hard my ears rang, but it wasn't the sting that broke me, it was the words he spat next. Give your savings to your brother or get out of my house. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments, what would you do if your own family demanded your future like a debt? My name is Summer. And until that night, I still believed family meant protection, love, and sacrifice. I was the reliable one, the early riser, the steady paycheck that made sure the light stayed on. I guarded a single hope like a flame cupped in my hands, university, then my own business. I saved in small, stubborn amounts, tips, overtime, coins in a jar that sang when you shook it. Our living room smelled like lemon cleaner and old smoke. Dad sat in his armchair, elbows on knees, the remote like a small black knife in his fist. Mom hovered in the doorway to the kitchen, drying a dish with the towel she never seemed to set down. Chase sprawled on the couch, phone face down, knee bouncing, the way it always did when he was in trouble. Dad didn't waste time. Your brother's in a bad spot, he said, like an announcer calling weather. You're going to help. My mouth went dry. How much? All of it, he said. This month's pay. And the savings. The whole pot. I laughed, one dry, shocked note. That's my tuition. You've got a job, he said, waving it off. A good, steady one. You don't need college to stand behind a counter. I'm not planning to stay behind a counter, I said, hearing my voice rise and trying to pull it back. I've applied. I got my acceptance letter. Orientation is in 3 weeks. Chase rolled his eyes. Orientation. Like you're so important. I stared at him. How much do you owe? He tilted his head, calculated shame. Not that much. How much? I said again. He shrugged. A few thousand. Dad sighed. 10. 10 what? I asked though I knew. 1,000, Dad said, jaw tightening. The kind of people you don't keep waiting. He leaned back like the number was my failure. Family comes first, Summer. Something crawled up my spine. Family comes first, when I'm paying your phone bill. Family comes first, when I'm buying groceries. Family comes first, when you needed my spare bedroom rent for the 3rd month in a row, Chase. But when I say I want to go to university. Mom cut in, soft, practiced. We're not saying you can't go. We're saying now isn't the time. She stepped a little closer, towel twisting in her hands. Be reasonable. Your brother's in danger. Because he chose to be, I said. Because he keeps choosing to be. I looked at Chase. Which casino this time? His knee bounced faster. Don't act like you're perfect. I don't, I said quietly. I act like I'm responsible. Dad's voice sharpened. Watch your tone. My cheek still tingled where his eyes seemed to aim, as if the slap had already happened in his head. I swallowed. I have been watching my tone for years. Memories flicked through me like index cards. Dad praising Chase's entrepreneur spirit when he resold stolen sneakers, Mom slipping my tip envelope into the household jar just until Friday, me lying awake counting my savings like a prayer, touching the corner of each bill to make sure it was real. Dad pointed at the hallway. Bring the box, he said. My stomach dropped. What box? He smiled without humor. Don't play dumb. The one under your bed. Heat rose into my face. You've been in my room? This is my house, he said. Everything under this roof is mine. Chase snorted. Even her college jar, guess so. A pulse thumped in my temple. I heard the clock on the wall, the cheap one with the crooked 8, click each second like a countdown. No, I said. I've paid for that money with my time, my work, my sleep. I'm not giving it to you. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Dad stood. The remote slipped to the cushion with a soft thud. He didn't yell yet. He stepped in, close enough that I could smell the cigarettes woven into his jacket. You will hand it over, he said, voice low. Your brother's got men after him. You want blood on your hands. The question made me flinch. Don't put that on me. Who else, he said. You're the only one in this family with a job worth a damn. There it was, praise sharpened into obligation. Love measured in invoices. I saw something with brutal clarity. If I gave it now, I would give it forever. If I handed over that box, I'd be handing over my future in advance, monthly, like rent. No, I said again, steadier. I won't. Chase sat up, lips peeling back. You think you're better than us? I think I am responsible for my life, I said. And I'm not financing your mistakes anymore. The towel in Mom's hands stilled. Summer, she said, voice small but sharp like a needle, family is everything. Then why, I asked, words trembling now, does this family only remember I'm part of it when there's a bill to pay? Dad's face changed. He grabbed my wrist, hard. You don't talk to your mother like that. Pain spiked up my arm. I tried to pull away, but he yanked me closer. Let go, I said. Bring the box. No. The sound of the slap was crisp, obscene. The room swam and then snapped back. Copper rose in my mouth. I stumbled into the coffee table, the coaster skidding to the carpet like a small white moon. For half a breath, I thought he might apologize. He looked at his hand, then at me, as if measuring whether it had worked. You'll do as I say, he repeated, louder now. My cheek burned. Tears rose, hot and immediate. I blinked them back, stubborn. You don't get to hit me into obedience. Mom's voice, Summer, stop being dramatic. Your father is under stress. Chase's voice, you're making this worse. The clock kept clicking. The room kept shrinking. Every phrase I'd ever heard, you're the strong one, you can handle it, just this once, we'll pay you back, stacked in my chest like bricks. I thought of my acceptance letter tucked in the pocket of my backpack, the ink of my name slanted and sure. Dad grabbed my arm again and tugged me toward the hallway. I twisted free. Adrenaline made my hands shake. I am not your wallet, I said, each word precise. I'm your daughter. You're ungrateful, he said. We fed you. We gave you a roof. I paid for the power bill last winter, I said, voice breaking. I bought groceries all spring. I worked double shifts while Chase slept. Chase sprang to his feet. I was sick. You were hungover. He lunged like he might shove me. Dad put an arm out, not to protect me, I realized, but to keep Chase from ruining the performance of his righteous anger. He pointed at the door. Get out if you won't help your family. There it was, the ultimatum wrapped like a gift I never wanted. I waited for Mom to say my name the way she used to when I fell off my bike, the soft Summer that bandaged everything. Instead she folded the towel. Your father is right, she said. We need you to be practical. Dreams can wait. Dreams, like desserts, like shoes at the store window. Pretty. Optional. Put them back. I steadied my breathing. The hurt in me, raw and huge, shifted its weight and became something else, cool, thin, like a blade. Okay, I said, and Dad's eyebrows rose, misreading my tone as surrender. Okay, I repeated, I'll be practical. I turned to my room. Behind me, their voices lapped against the walls, Dad muttering, Mom rationalizing, Chase saying something about those guys and tonight. My hands moved on their own, duffel from the closet, lockbox from under the bed. I opened it and ran my fingers over the bills the way you might touch a loved one's face after too long apart, confirming the edges, the reality. This was my power, small and paper-thin, but mine. I packed quietly. Jeans, work shirts, my worn sneakers. The whispering zipper sounded loud in the still of the hallway. I took my acceptance letter and slid it into the front pocket of my backpack like a talisman. I paused at the mirror. My cheek had bloomed into a red oval. I pressed my fingertips to it and felt the heat, the shape of the moment pressed into me. Down the hall, Dad's voice rumbled low. She'll come around. Mom's soft reply, she always does. Not this time, I thought. And the thought was both terrifying and electrifying, like stepping off a curb you hadn't seen and finding yourself not falling. I waited until midnight. The house breathed its old, familiar sounds, the heater knocking, the neighbor's dog, the fridge's tired hum. I stood in the doorway of my room and looked one last time at the bed where I'd planned my life and made myself small so I could stay. Then I slipped out, duffel on shoulder, lockbox in my backpack, keys tucked into my palm like a promise. At the front door, I hesitated. I could hear Dad snore. I could hear the clock. I could hear my pulse. I thought of the girl I'd been all these years, saying yes when I meant no, believing that love required shrinking. I whispered goodbye, not to them but to her. The night outside was cold and clean. The air tasted like rain. I walked to the bus stop with my jacket open and my future bright enough to make my eyes water. The station was mostly empty, tired travelers, a vending machine light flickering like a heartbeat. I bought a ticket to a city where I knew exactly one street and the name of a university registrar I'd emailed twice. When the bus pulled in, brakes sighing, I climbed aboard and took a window seat. The glass was cool against my forehead. In it, my reflection looked older, or maybe just awake. As the bus pulled away, the neighborhoods blurred, the pawn shop with the neon rings, the laundromat like a fishbowl of spinning shirts, the diner where I used to count tips. I pressed my hand to my backpack where the lockbox rested and felt something loosen inside me, a knot I'd carried so long I'd thought it was part of my spine. I didn't know how I'd afford everything, not really. I didn't know how many shifts I'd have to beg for, how many nights I'd fall asleep over textbooks with drool on the margins. I didn't know that in a few years, I'd sign documents with my company's name on the letterhead, or that the same man who slapped me would eventually stand in my lobby pretending not to see the receptionist reading Summer Heart, CEO on the wall. What I knew was this: I was done financing other people's chaos with my future. The rest, I would learn. Dawn met us as we crossed the river into the city that would become mine. The water below was the color of coin. The first coffee smell reached the bus and folded itself around me like a beginning. I closed my eyes and let the sound of the engine carry me forward, away from the door that had closed, toward the one I would build. The city was bigger than I remembered. Buildings leaned into the sky, glass flashing gold in the early light. The air smelled like wet pavement and burnt espresso. The bus dropped me at a station buzzing with people who looked like they belonged somewhere. I stood there for a moment, duffel on my shoulder, realizing I didn't. Not yet. The first night, I found a room in a hostel. It was the kind of place where the walls were thin enough to hear other people's alarms and the showers never quite got warm. But it was cheap, and I needed cheap. I laid my head down that night with the lockbox under my pillow, like a child with a teddy bear, and tried not to think about how far away home was, or how little I missed it. My first stop the next morning was the university registrar's office. The woman behind the desk glanced at my acceptance letter and smiled like it was just another piece of paper. For me, it was the ticket to a life I'd been told I couldn't afford. I handed over the tuition payment, my savings shrinking in a way that made my stomach twist, and walked out with a student ID card that felt heavier than gold. Finding a job came next. I walked block after block, handing out copies of my resume until my feet ached. Most places said they'd keep it on file. A tiny print shop 2 streets over from campus said I could start that night. The pay wasn't great, but I knew the machines, the ink, the rhythm of orders and pickups. Familiar territory was a comfort I hadn't realized I needed. So I worked. Classes from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., shift from 3 p.m. to closing. I came home with ink on my hands and the smell of toner in my hair. Dinner was usually instant noodles eaten cross-legged on my narrow bed, notes spread around me like a paper fortress. I fell asleep with my pen still in my hand more nights than I care to admit. The exhaustion was constant, but so was the quiet pride. Nobody was taking my paycheck. Nobody was telling me my dreams could wait. My time was mine, even if I was too tired to enjoy it. One rainy Thursday, I met him, the person who would later open doors I didn't even know existed. His name was Daniel Ross, mid-40s, sharp suit, the kind of confidence that filled a room without a single raised voice. He came into the shop needing a rush order of brochures for a business conference. I stayed an hour past closing to finish them. When he came to pick them up, he flipped through the stack, nodded once and said, "You're good at this. Most people your age don't care about the details." I shrugged, embarrassed. "Details are the whole thing," I said. His eyes narrowed in a way that wasn't unfriendly, like he was filing the answer away. He left his card on the counter. "If you ever want something more than this, call me." At the time, I didn't. I thought something more was finishing my degree. I tucked the card into the back of my wallet and forgot about it. Months passed. Winter settled in, the kind that freezes your breath before it leaves your mouth. My coat wasn't warm enough, my shoes leaked when it snowed, but my grades were holding and the shop kept me just above water. I sent out holiday cards to no one, I didn't have anyone's address anymore. Sometimes I wondered if my parents thought about me. If they told people I'd left. If they pretended they didn't know where I was. It hurt less to think they didn't. Then one night after my shift, I counted my tips and realized I had enough for something small. Not rent, not tuition, but a pair of sturdy boots I'd been eyeing in a shop window for weeks. I bought them the next morning. It was such a simple thing, but walking to class with dry feet felt like victory. The first big break came unexpectedly. The shop owner called in sick, leaving me alone when a large corporate order came through: banners, flyers, event materials, all due in 48 hours. It was chaos, but I managed it, staying until 3 a.m., double-checking every print. 2 days later, the client, Daniel Ross, walked back in. "You handled this?" he asked, looking genuinely surprised. "Yes," I said, unsure if it was good or bad. "Then you can handle more," he said. "I'm serious about what I told you before." I still wasn't ready to leap into the unknown, but something about the way he said it made me think maybe I could be. By the end of my first year, I'd paid for my second semester without touching the emergency cash in my lockbox. My grades were high enough to qualify for a scholarship. I moved out of the hostel into a tiny apartment with peeling paint and a view of the alley, but it was mine. I was building something, brick by brick. And though my hands were blistered and my back ached, the foundation felt solid. What I didn't know was that the life I was building would soon intersect with my family's again, not in the way I feared, but in a way that would test everything I'd become. By the time my final year of university began, I was a different person from the girl who had stepped off that bus with a duffel and a lockbox. I had an apartment, small yes, with peeling paint and a draft in winter, but it was mine. I had a steady job at the print shop, a scholarship that covered part of my tuition, and enough savings to make rent without holding my breath every month. I'd built this life brick by brick, and though my hands were blistered, the foundation was solid. It was in that first week back on campus that I saw him again, Daniel Ross. We'd crossed paths now and then over the past couple of years. He'd come into the shop for a last-minute job, and I'd handle it without fuss. He'd send a polite thank you email. But this time, he didn't come in as a client. I was on my lunch break, sitting on the stone steps outside the library, chewing on a stale sandwich, when a shadow fell across me. "Summer Heart," a familiar voice said. I looked up. Daniel was standing there in a tailored navy suit, looking like he'd stepped straight out of a business magazine. "I hear you're in your final year," he said, settling on the step beside me as if men in expensive suits always park themselves next to students eating discount bread. "That's right," I said cautiously. He studied me for a moment, his gaze sharp but not unkind. "You've been on my radar for a while. You have an attention to detail I don't often see, and you don't fall apart when things get messy." I wasn't sure what to say to that, so I took a sip of water and waited. "I'm offering you a position," he said. "Full-time, starting after graduation. You'd be working directly with me on major accounts. Strategy, operations, crisis management. It's intense. But it would put you in rooms most people your age don't even know exist." My first reaction was hesitation. Not because I didn't want it, but because for years, my plan had been to start my own business as soon as I graduated. I'd been saving, studying, sketching out ideas in the margins of my notebooks. Taking a job, even one this prestigious, felt like detouring from the path I'd promised myself. Daniel must have seen my conflict. "You want to run your own company someday," he said matter-of-factly. I blinked. "How?" "I pay attention," he said with a faint smile. "This position isn't the opposite of that dream. It's a stepping stone. You'll learn how the game works, who the players are, and how to win before you put your own name on the letterhead." He stood, brushing invisible dust from his sleeve. "Think about it. I'll need an answer in 2 weeks." He left a sleek business card on the step beside me and walked away, leaving the smell of expensive cologne and the faint sense that my life had just shifted. For the next week, I carried that card in my pocket like a coin I couldn't stop turning. Every time I felt its smooth edges, I thought of my first night in the city, counting my cash and wondering if I'd made a mistake. I thought of the endless shifts, the late nights, the hostel with the cold showers. I thought of my father's voice telling me I didn't need university. This offer was more than a job, it was proof that I'd been right to leave. I called Daniel the following Monday. "I'll take it," I said. "Good," he replied. "You start training next week." Training meant stepping into a world I'd only seen from the outside. Daniel's office was on the 27th floor of a glass tower, the kind where you could see the entire city stretched out like a map. The air smelled faintly of leather and fresh coffee. His assistant, a brisk woman named Clarice, handed me a thick folder on my first day. "This," she said, "is your life now." Inside were project briefs, client profiles, and schedules so tight they looked like military plans. My job was to anticipate problems before they became disasters. That meant long hours, sharp thinking, and keeping my voice steady even when a client was shouting in my ear. It was exhausting. It was exhilarating. Weeks turned into months. I learned to read a room in seconds, to tell when a client was bluffing, to translate Daniel's clipped instructions into full-scale action plans. He was a demanding mentor, never cruel, but relentless in expecting my best. And I gave it, because every day I was storing away lessons I'd one day use for myself. One evening, after a particularly tense negotiation, Daniel walked me to the elevator. "You handled yourself well," he said. "You didn't just hold your ground, you shifted theirs." I went home that night and wrote down everything I'd done in that meeting. It wasn't just about this job anymore. It was about building my playbook for the future. It was around this time that the past began to creep back in. A girl I'd known in high school messaged me on social media. "Heard you're doing well," she wrote. "Your family's not, though. Big trouble." I stared at the screen. She went on to say that my parents were drowning in debt, that my brother had gotten mixed up in something worse than gambling, and that there was talk they might lose the house. They didn't know where I was, but people had been speculating, saying I'd struck it rich and was too proud to come home. Proud. That word sat heavy in my chest. They'd called me ungrateful before, now it was proud. Either way, it was an accusation, never a compliment. I closed the message without replying. For the first time since leaving, I didn't feel fear at the thought of seeing them again. I felt ready. Not eager, but steady. If they came to me now, they wouldn't find the girl they'd slapped and sent packing. They'd find a woman who knew her worth, and who no longer owed them anything. I didn't know then how soon that test would come. On the morning I hung my company's sign, the receptionist leaned into my doorway and whispered, "There's a man in the lobby who says he's your father." I looked up at the fresh letters on the glass, Heartline Strategy, and felt the past press its forehead to the future. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments, if the family that threw you out showed up the day you finally made it, would you let them in? The year had been a sprint over a tightrope. By day I worked under Daniel Ross, sharpening instincts I didn't know I had. By night I wrote the bones of the thing that had lived in my chest since I first folded $1 into a jar, my own company. I kept the two worlds clean, no overlap, no borrowed contacts, because debt comes in many forms, and I refused to owe anyone the shape of my name. Daniel never asked for more than the job required, but he noticed everything. After a presentation where I'd turned a snarling client into a grateful one with nothing but facts and a steady voice, he stopped me at the elevator. "What do you want most?" he asked. "To build something that doesn't vanish when the meeting ends," I said before I could edit myself. "Something with my name on it." He nodded like I'd finally given the correct answer to a question he'd been asking silently for months. "Good. When you're ready to do that, do it clean. Tell me before you move. Don't poach. I'll open doors that aren't mine to keep." I didn't know how to thank him without sounding like a child. So I didn't. I just wrote everything down. At night my apartment turned into a workshop. The table where I ate noodles became a battlefield of spreadsheets, legal forms, and diagrams. I auditioned names the way you try on coats: Summer Heart Consulting, Too Soft, Heartline, Clean Strong, Heartline Strategy, yes. I bought the domain with hands that shook and filed the LLC papers with a giddy, terrified click. The state website confirmed it. I existed. I found a logo by accident. On a scrap of paper I drew a thin line bending but not breaking, a small heart nestled at the pivot point. "Pressure makes direction, not destruction," I wrote beneath it. I taped the sketch to the wall. I set rules. No clients that overlapped with Daniel's portfolio. No work I wouldn't sign with my whole name. No friends and family discounts. I had learned the cost of that currency. I saved until the lockbox under my bed felt heavier with purpose than with fear. I said no to dinners, to weekends, to the lazy comfort of sleep. My body learned to run on black coffee and a quiet, bright urgency. The first project arrived not with trumpets but with an email from an old campus contact, a small nonprofit drowning in a rebrand they couldn't afford to mess up. They needed messaging, a launch plan, and someone who could herd 4 passionate founders toward one decision. "I can do it," I wrote. I did it. Metrics climbed, donations followed. A local reporter covered the campaign with a photo that, to my surprise, included me in the background, a woman with a clipboard and a grin she hadn't planned. That win woke the city up to my existence. A cafe chain asked for a loyalty program revamp. A fintech startup wanted crisis planning just in case. I reported none of this to Daniel because it never crossed into his lanes. Still, the day I knew the side business had become the business was the day I looked at my calendar and realized I could no longer respectfully do both. I booked a meeting. Daniel listened without interrupting. His office made the skyline look like a toy set. "I wanted you to hear it from me first," I said. "I'm resigning. I've registered Heartline Strategy. I'll honor a non-solicit of your clients for 12 months. I'll hand over everything clean." He steepled his fingers. "You've been building it for a while." "Yes," I said, owning it. "At night. No conflicts." "Good," he said. "Don't apologize for ambition. Apologize for sloppiness. You've never been sloppy." Relief moved through me like warmth after a long cold. "Thank you." He stood, extended his hand, then, unexpectedly, smiled. "Send Clarice your address. When the lease is signed, I'll have something delivered." "What kind of something?" "The kind founders forget to buy until they need it," he said. "Congratulations, Ms. Hart." I didn't cry in his office. I waited until I was in the elevator, where the mirrored walls caught the evidence and gave it right back. The office I could afford was on the 4th floor of a brick building that smelled faintly of sawdust and coffee. The space had 2 rooms, a tiny entry with a window that shrugged at the sun, and a back room large enough for a conference table if you didn't mind walking sideways to get around it. The carpet was new. The paint was still drying. I ran my palm along the wall and felt the texture catch at my skin. I signed the lease with a pen I'd bought for $3 and felt like I was etching it in gold. The delivery from Daniel arrived the next morning, a matte black networked printer that could outlive nations, and a plant so green it looked like confidence. The card read, "For what you'll build here. D." I texted him a photo of the plant by the window and the printer like a small spaceship. "Thank you. I won't waste it." "Don't waste yourself either," he replied. "Hire help before you think you deserve it." He wasn't wrong. I posted a part-time assistant listing and hired Mina, a final-year design student with eyes that saw angles I missed. On her first day she asked where we kept the style guide. I gestured to my head. "Up here." She opened a Google Doc and said, "Let's put it somewhere other people can live." We were a company. If success had a sound, it wasn't a cheer. It was the steady click of things aligning. Clients started referring clients. Meetings ended with handshakes and the question I loved most, "What's next?" Mina brought in a friend to help with overflow. We borrowed a conference room down the hall when 2 chairs no longer felt like enough. Sometimes, late at night, I'd stay after everyone left and turn off the lamps one by one, the way you might tuck children into bed. In the dark glass of the front door I saw my reflection, clearer now than the girl on the bus. The letters Heartline Strategy floated above my shoulder, a banner I had earned. And then the first message came. "Unknown number, Summer, it's Mom. Please call me." The words drained the heat from the room. I stared until the screen dimmed, until my face returned to me in the black. I set the phone down on the table as if it might explode. Mina popped her head in. "Everything okay?" "Yes," I said, which was true if everything meant the client deck and not the century-old ache attached to the name Mom. I didn't call back. The next day there were 3 more messages. The 4th had fewer pleasantries. "We're in trouble. Your brother. There's been a misunderstanding. Please don't be stubborn. Family is family. Family is family, a lasso thrown at your throat." I put the phone in a drawer until the urge to answer for the child I had been past. They found another way in. A week later, the cafe downstairs buzzed with the tinny edge of panic. 2 men in uniforms stood by the door. The barista whispered health inspection, and rolled her eyes. Someone had snitched. When I asked if they needed anything from the businesses upstairs, one of the inspectors glanced at his clipboard and said, "We got a call." Anonymous. He shrugged and moved on. Chase always loved Anonymous. He'd once lit a fire in our backyard and blamed it on the weather. That afternoon my landlord forwarded an email sent to all tenants with the subject, "Noise Complaint, Suite 4B." It was detailed, precise, and entirely false. The sender had created a brand new account with a name that made my stomach lurch, FamilyFirst_Truth. I sat very still. Then I opened a new document and typed new rule number 4, do not let old chaos rewrite the new order. I printed it and taped it under the logo sketch. Mina read it, nodded, and kept working like the universe hadn't just tried to test the integrity of our walls. That night I finally called the number. Mom answered on the first ring. "Summer," she breathed, and for a second I heard the version of her who tucked a blanket around me the year I had the flu, the one who whispered, "Oh, Summer," like a spell against anything sharp. Then the present lowered its visor. "We need help," she said. "Your father lost ours. The mortgage, I don't want to bother you, but the bank." "What about Chase?" I asked, calm as a ledger. "He's trying," she said quickly. "He had an opportunity, but it fell through. He's under a lot of stress. We're all under stress." Stress, the family heirloom, passed down like a watch that never kept time. "I'm not a bank," I said gently. "I can't send you money." Silence. I could hear her measuring which lever might move me. "You're successful now," she said finally. "People talk." "I'm building something, Mom," I said. "Brick by brick. If I remove bricks to patch holes you keep drilling, the whole thing falls." "You always were dramatic," she said, the old needle slipping back into its groove. "We fed you, gave you a roof." I didn't let her finish. "I'll help with jobs, not cash. If Dad wants work, I can connect him. If he wants to interview here, I'll look at a maintenance role. I'll help you restructure bills. I'll put you in touch with a counselor. That's my offer." "That's insulting," she snapped. "Your father is not going to be your employee." "He doesn't have to be," I said evenly. "But I won't fund Chase's latest opportunity." "Family is family," she said again, as if the phrase were a key that used to open me and she couldn't admit it no longer fit the lock. "Family is behavior," I said. "You know where to find me if you want the help I offered." I ended the call with hands that shook the way they had the night I packed my bag, and then I breathed until the floor steadied under me. 2 days later, Mina buzzed my office. "There's a walk-in asking for you," she said. "No appointment. He says it's urgent." "I'm in the middle of." "I know," she whispered. "Summer, his last name is Hart." I didn't stand up. I didn't run. I looked at the door with my name on it and thought about the rule I'd taped to the wall. Then I stacked my papers, put a paperweight on the corner so nothing would blow away, and told Mina, "Let him wait 10 minutes. Then send him in." Those 10 minutes did not kill me. They built me. They let my pulse climb the stairs and take a seat where I needed it, in my chest, not my throat. When the door opened, the man I remembered as bigger, louder, invincible stepped in with a jacket that had lost its shape and eyes that hadn't. He scanned the room the way he had scanned my childhood, for weaknesses. He saw the logo first. Heartline Strategy. The letters he'd once told me I didn't need anywhere but on a paycheck stub now lived on my wall. "Nice place," he said. It wasn't a compliment. It was a calculation. "Have a seat," I said, and my voice sounded like the person I had built. He didn't sit. "Your mother said you'd be difficult." "My mother says many things when she's scared," I said, "and when she wants what she wants." He lifted his chin, reading how much history the room could hold. "We need help," he said. "The bank, and Chase, it's not as bad as people say. Just a temporary thing." "You came because I said I wouldn't send money," I said. "So you thought you could change my mind in person." He stared. "Are you helping us or not?" "I'm offering work," I said, gesturing to a printed maintenance checklist on the credenza. "Flexible hours. Fair pay. Or I can connect you to a crew that needs foremen. You were good on sites. You taught me how to tie a load so it didn't shift in transit, remember?" For a second, just a second, his face softened at the shared past. Then the old posture snapped back. "I'm not taking charity." "It's not charity," I said. "It's a job. The kind you told me was enough for a life." A muscle twitched in his jaw. You think this makes you better than us? This makes me responsible for me, I said. Something you taught me by accident. He glanced at the door, at the plant by the window, at the stack of proposals with my letterhead. Chase says you owe the family, he said finally, choosing the lever he thought had always worked. We invested in you. I let the words settle. I let them fail. You didn't invest, I said. You spent. On him. On chaos. I invested. In me. For the first time he sat, like the chair had become a negotiation tool he could at least control. How much can you spare? He asked, dropping the pretense. Just until. No cash, I said. Work or referrals. That's the offer. He leaned forward. If you don't help us, you'll regret it. I leaned back. I already regret far more expensive things. We stared at each other across the desk where I'd taught myself to live. He was the first to look away. He stood, every movement a verdict. You changed, he said. No, I said. I stopped apologizing. He reached for the door, then paused. You think that sign makes you someone? I looked past him at the letters on the glass. It doesn't make me someone, I said. It tells the truth about who I already became. He left without slamming the door. The quiet after him felt like a fresh coat of paint drying fast. Mina slipped in, eyes wide. Do you want? I want the 10 a.m. moved to 11, I said. And I want coffee. She nodded, already in motion. I turned the plant toward the light and breathed, the way you do after a race you've trained for since you learned how to run. That night, after the building emptied and the city traded its tie for a loose collar, I stood in the lobby and looked up at my name on the glass. I thought of the bus ticket, the lockbox, the slap that had been a door disguised as a wall. I thought of my mother's voice, raw with fear and pride stitched together into something that always cut. My phone buzzed. A new message. Not from Mom. From an unknown number that wasn't unknown at all. You made a mistake. Chase. Beneath it, a photo of the house where I'd learned how to shrink, a foreclosure notice taped to the door like a scarlet letter. Fix it or everyone will know who you really are, he wrote. I stared at the screen until my reflection replaced the threat. Then I took a photo of my office door, the one with Heartline strategy etched into its face, and sent it back without words. He replied with 3 dots that blinked and never became a sentence. I set the phone face down. Tomorrow I would call a lawyer. Not to rescue them, but to protect the thing I had built from whatever storm Chase thought he could call down. I would also call a foreman I knew to see if there was a crew who could use a man who once taught his daughter to tie impossible knots. I locked the door and stepped into the hallway. The building hummed around me like a body at rest. The first time a client hinted at those rumors, I smiled like I didn't know what they meant. The second time, I realized Chase wasn't just circling, he was throwing stones at the windows of my life. The foreclosure notice on my family's door should have been their problem. But in the age of phone cameras and idle curiosity, it became everyone's problem. A neighbor posted a photo online. Within hours it spread, shared by people who hadn't spoken my name in years, tagged with speculation about whether I'd let my parents lose their home. I ignored it at first. Let people talk. But then a client, during a coffee meeting, leaned forward and asked, "Is everything okay at home?" Her voice was gentle, but the question wasn't. I kept my tone steady. Everything in my home is fine. She smiled, but the doubt was already there, the kind that doesn't ask for facts, just a story to believe. 2 days later, an email arrived from an address I recognized immediately. From Chase Hart. Subject: Time to make things right. The body was short. We both know you can afford it. Pay the mortgage. Clear my debt. Or I'll tell everyone exactly how you made your money. The arrogance would have been laughable if it weren't so predictable. My money was clean, built client by client, hour by hour, but I knew the power of suggestion. Chase didn't need proof, he just needed to plant seeds. By Friday, I could feel it in the air, whispers in the hall when I passed, a couple of missed calls from numbers tied to potential contracts, and one meeting rescheduled with no reason given. It wasn't a storm yet, but the wind had changed. Mina noticed it too. You're quieter, she said, closing the office door behind her. I'm thinking, I said. You look like you're loading ammunition. I almost smiled. Maybe I am. The calls from my mother started up again. He's not himself, Summer. He's desperate. Just talk to your brother. He can be reasoned with. And my favorite, if this gets out, it'll hurt you too. It was almost admirable, the way she could twist the knife with one hand and pretend to bandage with the other. I stopped answering. The next escalation came fast. An anonymous account posted a long, ugly thread online, accusing me of abandoning my family, of building my business with borrowed funds, of exploiting connections I didn't deserve. They even included a photo of me from my first year in the city, tired, thinner than I am now, standing outside the print shop in the rain. To anyone who didn't know the truth, it looked like a before shot in a story about corruption. It was Chase's style all over it, just enough truth to carry the lies. That weekend, I didn't leave my apartment. I sat at my desk, reading every post, every comment, every share. Not because I believed them, but because I needed to know exactly how the ground was shifting. I mapped out the names I recognized, the accounts that were new, the patterns in the language. It was a web, but not a complicated one. Mina called late Sunday night. You're not going to give in, are you? No, I said. I'm going to answer. Just not the way they expect. Monday morning, I put on the sharpest suit I owned and called a meeting with my lawyer, an old client who owed me a favor, and a PR strategist I trusted. I laid out everything, the foreclosure, the threats, the smear campaign. We can kill the posts legally, the lawyer said. The PR strategist shook her head. Better to drown them out. Control the narrative before it controls you. I nodded. That's exactly what I had in mind. By midweek, we were ready. First, I reached out to the local business journal and pitched them a feature, a clean, well-photographed piece about Heartline Strategies growth, our community work, and a new initiative supporting young entrepreneurs. It wasn't a lie, it was just a different headline than the one my brother wanted. Second, I quietly passed along Chase's emails and the anonymous accounts activity to someone in law enforcement who'd once been a client. Not for immediate action, yet, but for documentation. Third, I made a call I'd been holding back on for years. Daniel Ross picked up on the second ring. I need a door opened, I said. He didn't ask which one, or why. Done, he said. The real twist, though, came later that night. I received a message from a number I didn't recognize. You don't know me, but I know your brother. He's planning something bigger than rumors. And it's going to involve your company. There was no name, just an address and a time. I stared at it for a long minute, weighing every instinct I'd honed since the night I left home. Then I forwarded it to my lawyer with one line: if I'm not at my desk tomorrow by noon, call the police. The next day, I stood in the shadows across from a dingy bar in the oldest part of the city, watching my brother through the fogged windows. He was leaning over a table with two men I didn't recognize, papers spread between them. When one of the men lifted his head, I caught sight of a logo on the page. It wasn't a bank. It was my company's logo. I walked away without letting him see me. Not because I was afraid, but because the finale was no longer about protecting myself. It was about ending this, publicly, in a way that would leave no room for another comeback. If Chase wanted a story, I was going to give him one. But it would be mine. I didn't walk into that dingy back room with rage. I walked in with a plan. The anonymous tip had given me an address and a time. The night before, my lawyer and the detective I'd looped and reviewed everything. The smear posts, the emails, the foreclosure spiral, the photo of my childhood door with the red notice like a siren. The detective listened without interrupting, then asked one question: if they try to impersonate your company, can you prove it on the spot? Yes, I said. I can make sure of it. So I did. Mina and I had built a new invoice template that morning with a micro watermark in the negative space between letters, a detail you wouldn't notice unless you knew where to look. We added a verification clause to our real proposals, a QR code that linked to an authenticity page. We scheduled a public post for the next day: Heartline Strategy will never ask for upfront cash or send contracts from personal emails. Verify all documents here. It wasn't defensive. It was policy. Finally, I called one more person, Daniel. I might need a room, I said. With a glass wall. And a door that locks quietly. Come by after hours, he replied. Use the 27th floor conference room. And Summer. He paused. Make it clean. The men at the bar weren't careful. They didn't check the hallway. They didn't expect me to show up in a black suit with calm eyes and a file under my arm. They expected the version of me who cried when a door slammed. She was busy. "Hi, Chase," I said as two uniforms stepped in behind me and posted at the corners like polite furniture. "You brought friends." He went pale, then flushed, uglier than any color I was prepared for. "What are you doing here?" "Watching you try to sell a fake version of my company," I said, keeping my tone friendly. "It's educational." One of the men bristled. "This is a private contract meeting?" I supplied, and set my file on the table. "Let's compare paperwork." Chase reached for the fake contract. I was faster. I slid their copy next to mine like a magician's reveal. "See this?" I pointed to the bottom margin. "This is where the watermark lives." I tilted mine so the thin line glowed. I tilted theirs. Blank. The detective stepped forward, badge visible. "Gentlemen, we're going to need to talk about impersonation and attempted fraud." Chaos is loud when it's cornered. The men argued. Chase swore. The table shuddered as someone's knee hit it. The bartender pretended to watch a game that wasn't on. Through it all, I stayed very still, the way you do when you hold a scalpel. "Summer, please," my brother said finally, jaw trembling. He pitched his voice lower, private, like we were kids whispering on a school night. "I was just trying to fix things," they said. "They always say," I said softly. "And you always believe the version that pays you without work." The detective placed a gentle hand on my arm. "Ms. Hart, we've got what we need." He turned to Chase. "Sir, you're coming with us." Chase looked at me like the door between us had slammed in his face, and I was the one who'd closed it. "You're really going to let them?" "I'm going to let the consequences arrive," I said. "You invited them." They led him out without cuffs. Still, the click of the door closing behind them sounded like metal. I didn't go home. I went to the 27th floor with the glass wall and the quiet lock. Mina joined me there, laptop open, fingers flying. She pulled up the authenticity page we'd built and watched the traffic spike as our scheduled policy post went live. The Business Journal ran our feature the same hour, photos of the team and a headline we wrote with the PR strategist, "From night shifts to C-suite, how Heartline strategy builds without breaking." The comments that used to say heard she abandoned her family now said booked a consult last month, professional from start to finish. Story is a tide, if you don't set the moon, somebody else will. I ate crackers from a vending machine and waited for my phone to ring. It didn't. It buzzed with texts from numbers I hadn't saved because I was done saving people who only called when they needed. Then finally, the name I knew would appear. "Mom, what did you do to your brother?" I stared at the screen until my reflection replaced the words. Then I typed, "I didn't do anything to him. I stopped doing it for him." I added, "There's still an offer on the table. Jobs, referrals, a budget plan, counseling. No cash." Her reply came fast, brittle. "You've forgotten where you come from." I put the phone face down and watched the city pour itself into night. The next week belonged to the cleanup. My lawyer filed a civil action to keep my brand insulated from any further impersonation. The detective called with updates I couldn't repeat publicly. The PR strategist staggered the story arcs, one community profile, one thought leadership piece, one short clip of Mina talking about the design team's pro bono work for a youth shelter. The truth didn't shout. It stacked. On Wednesday morning, the receptionist buzzed my office. "Your 10 o'clock is here," she said. "He said he wasn't sure you'd see him." Name. A beat. Mr. Hart. I let him sit in the lobby for 5 minutes. Not to punish him. To breathe. When he came in, he scanned the glass door the way he'd scanned it the first time, looking for a loose screw that would let him take the whole thing apart. He didn't find one. He sat. He didn't touch the plant by the window. I had turned it toward the light. "I heard about Chase," he said. "I'm sure you did." He looked down at his hands. The knuckles were nicked, a man who worked, or fought, or both. "Your mother's angry," he said. He paused, as if the right word might change the weather. "I'm tired." I remembered his jacket draped over a chair after double shifts when I was a kid. I remembered him teaching me how to tie knots that didn't slip. You can respect a skill without forgiving what was done to you in its name. I have an offer, I said. Same as before. Maintenance here. Or referrals to crews that need a foreman. I'll vouch for your work ethic. I won't vouch for your son. He stared at me like I'd brought him a tool he used to hold every day and then forgot the shape of. You really won't just help. I am helping, I said. The kind that lasts. The kind that doesn't rot the beam under the paint. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, something in the set of his jaw had shifted, not softened exactly, but steadied. When do I start? Mina got him a stack of forms. He signed them with a hand that didn't shake. When he left, he didn't say thank you. He nodded once, at the logo on the door. Sometimes apology is too expensive for the people who owe it. Sometimes work is the only version they can afford. The calls from my mother did not stop. The words changed shape: blame, plea, memory, threat. Your name will be dragged through the mud. We're family, Summer. You always were dramatic. Help us like a good daughter. If you knew what people were saying. I knew. I also knew what people were saying in rooms she'd never walk into, words like integrity, delivery, growth. I answered her the same way every time: jobs and referrals, budget and counseling, no cash. Some nights I cried after I hung up quietly, so the walls didn't learn to echo it back. On Friday, the Business Journal hosted a breakfast panel, founders who built from nothing. They asked me to sit under bright hotel chandeliers and talk about risk in a blazer that fit. When the moderator asked, "What do you owe your past?" I didn't say everything. I said, clarity. Afterward, in the hallway, a woman my mother's age stopped me. I watched your feature, she said. My daughter wants to quit school because her boyfriend says college is a waste. I showed her your video. What did she say? I asked. She said she could hear you breathing in the pauses, the woman said, smiling. Said it sounded like courage. I went back to the office and wrote a check that wasn't a rescue. It was a seed, the Lockbox Fund, a small scholarship for students applying to university without family support. 2 sentences on our website, no fanfare: if you need that first semester paid so you can walk through a door, apply here. We will verify, we will be discreet, we will not ask you to pay us back. The inbox filled slowly. Carefully. Carefully was the point. That night, the detective called. We're done, he said. Your brother pled to a lesser charge. The impersonation stops or he violates terms, and it gets much worse. I thanked him and set the phone down. Then I picked it up and texted my mother one more time: I won't discuss Chase's case. The offer stands for you and Dad. Work. Budgets. Counseling. I hope you take it. Her reply took an hour. Your father started a job today. He thinks he's too good for a mop. I told him pride doesn't pay mortgages. I stared at the screen. The silence after that text wasn't empty. It was space. 2 weeks later, Dad came in early to fix a door that stuck when the heat came on. He worked without asking for an audience. When he finished, he stood in my doorway, cap in his hands. That little logo, he said, nodding toward the glass. It's everywhere in here. It is, I said. He cleared his throat. You were a stubborn kid. So were you. He tilted his head, conceded the point. That plant, he said abruptly, gesturing to the green by the window. It'll die if you keep it in the draft. Then I'll move it, I said, and did. He watched without speaking, then nodded. See you Monday, boss. Boss. Not daughter, not ungrateful, not better than. I didn't exalt the word. I let it sit where it belonged, next to my name on the payroll he'd signed that morning with his own hand. The smear posts didn't vanish. The internet doesn't believe in erasers. But they got quieter. The story people repeated when my name came up sounded more like the truth because we fed it with proof: work, policy, steadiness, outcomes. Clients who asked delicate questions got clear answers. We have a verification portal. We never ask for cash. Here's the number to call if you receive a suspicious document. We harden the surface without hardening our faces. And me? I slept. Not like a woman who had finally outrun the old house, but like a woman who knew she didn't have to run to keep it behind her. On a Sunday morning, I took the lockbox from my closet and set it on my kitchen table. The metal was scratched, stubborn. I opened it. Inside were the last few bills I kept there out of habit, a totem against hunger. I counted them once, for the ceremony more than the math, then slipped them into an envelope addressed to the first Lockbox Fund recipient, a girl whose essay had made me breathe like it hurt. I wrote a note, for the bus ticket, the deposit, the first stack of pens. For the first night you sleep in your own life. I carried the envelope to the postbox and felt something loosen that I hadn't known was still cinched. On the anniversary of the day I signed my lease, the team surprised me with a cake and a card Daniel had somehow signed without coming by. He called that afternoon. You made it clean, he said. I tried. You succeeded, he said. That's rarer than you think. I learned from the best. Flattery accepted, he said dryly. Then, what's next? Building something that doesn't vanish when the meeting ends, I said, smiling into the phone. Something with my name on it. You've already done that, he said. Now teach other people to do the same. I looked at Mina through the glass, bent over a layout with the concentration of someone who can hear the future if she listens hard enough. I plan to. Later that evening, as the sunset dragged a copper coin over the skyline, my phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. I heard about what you did for that scholarship. Does it come with strings? I typed back, only the kind that tie a knot and hold. Then, because old habits die hardest when ignored, I added, we verify carefully. We don't ask you to pay us back. Just don't vanish on yourself. 3 dots. No reply. That was fine. Not every story needs to answer you when you call its name. I turned off the office lights one by one. The logo on the door held the last light like a promise. On my way out, I paused under it and touched the glass with 2 fingers the way I used to touch the lockbox, checking for reality. It was there. Not a spell. Not a wish. A door I had built and then learned to open and close on purpose. People ask me sometimes if I regret not writing a check to make it all go away. Here is what I tell them. Writing checks without boundaries is how you build a house of wet paper and call it shelter. Saying no is not cruelty. It is carpentry. It is choosing beams over slogans. It is refusing to make your future the currency in someone else's casino. Family is not the word. Family is the behavior. The night my father slapped me, I thought power lived on the hand that hit. It doesn't. Power lives in the hand that reaches for the bag, for the bus ticket, for the pen that signs your own name. Power is the voice that says, this is my door, and means it. So if you're listening to this at a sink full of dishes in a house that doesn't feel like home, if you're counting tips and counting on yourself, hear me, you are allowed to build something that doesn't vanish when someone else is hungry. You are allowed to make rules. You are allowed to keep them. And if they show up when you finally make it, if they laugh like they've always laughed, you can open the door. You can offer work. You can offer help that doesn't rot the beam. You can close the door again when they reach for your lockbox with empty promises in their pockets. That's not revenge. That's respect. For the life you built. For the person who built it. For the name on the glass.